U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry urges Nigerian politicians to ensure peaceful elections. Water payments go high-tech in a Nairobi slum. And actresses of African descent show off fashion-forward looks at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. The United States top diplomat has reiterated America's support to Nigeria in its fight against Boko Haram and called for rival political camps in Nigeria to respect the outcome of the February 14th presidential election. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke during a stop in Lagos on Sunday, where he met with the presidential candidates of two main parties. Here's more from our partner Channels Television.
Mr. Kerry's visit, one of the shortest for a high-profile U.S. official, was executed with a strong message from President Barack Obama that the United States and the international community is very interested in Nigeria conducting violence-free elections. Secretary Kerry, before the briefing, had met with the two main presidential candidates, Goodluck Jonathan of the PDP and General Muhammadu Buhari of the APC, to get their commitment to accepting the results of the election after February 14. He also expressed the United States' concern over the Boko Haram insurgency, which is why the U.S. president will be holding a summit next month on developing new strategies to combating terrorism. During their meeting, President Goodluck Jonathan assured him of Nigeria's commitment to building the multinational task force to fight Boko Haram alongside Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Benin Republic under the Lake Chad Basin Commission.
The fact is that one of the best ways to fight back against Boko Haram and similar groups is by protecting the peaceful, credible, and transparent elections that are essential to any thriving democracy, and certainly essential to the largest democracy in Africa. It's imperative that these elections happen on time, as scheduled, and that they are an improvement over past elections. And they need to set a new standard for this democracy.
Mr. Kerry urged Nigerians to speak out against violence during the elections and take the two candidates to task in upholding the Abuja Peace Accord. He warned of the consequences of anyone promoting violence before, during, and after the elections.
We are committed to helping the electoral process succeed. And last week, we sent an electoral security advisor in order to support INEC's efforts to advise on security concerns and to help develop a risk mapping tool to prepare for any violence that might emerge. So let me be clear. Anyone who participates in, plans, or calls for widespread or systematic violence against the civilian population must be held accountable, including by ineligibility for an American visa. Violence has no place in democratic elections, and I can guarantee you that the perpetrators of such violence would not be welcome in the United States of America.
The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made mention several times in his address the need to ensure violence-free elections. He says he's also met with INEC chairman, Professor Tahiru Jega, to ensure that this promise by INEC and the two presidential candidates is kept. Here in Lagos, Amarachi Ubani, Channels Television News.
Well, for more perspective on U.S.-Nigeria relations, we are joined by Emmanuel Ogebe, an international human rights lawyer and expert in bilateral U.S.-Nigeria relations. Mr. Ogebe, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Now, first, give me your thoughts on the significance of Secretary Kerry's visit to Nigeria at this moment.
Well, I have to say that it's a mixed bag because by this time in President Bush's tenure and in Clinton's tenure, they had both visited Nigeria twice. Mm-hmm. We're now in the twilight of Obama's tenure. He's never visited Nigeria. In fact, this is Secretary of State Kerry's first visit to Nigeria since he assumed office.
Someone will ask you, Africa has over 50 countries. Why would it be very important for the U.S. to make more frequent visits to Nigeria than other countries?
Yeah, let's remember that, they have a saying, follow the money. The U.S. foreign policy is predicated on economics, it's predicated on oil. Nigeria has been a top supplier to the United States. So even if they don't care that it's the largest African country, they should care that it's their top trade partner on the continent.
Now, this is the top trading partner, but it's a country in trouble.
Yes.
Boko Haram activity up in the northeast. What do you make of the fact that up to this point there doesn't seem to be such a strong collaboration in fighting Boko Haram?
I think that this sends a very sad message to the world. If the United States cannot stand by a really strong African partner like Nigeria, which has supported the U.S. in operations in Liberia and so on and so forth.
But are you going to blame the United States when the government of Nigeria, by the words of many Nigerians, doesn't seem to be committed to fighting Boko Haram in the northeast? I mean, it's been what? 5 years. Yeah. There is no evidence that the government of Nigeria is doing anything concrete.
Well, yes, but let's understand that the U.S. misled Nigeria in the beginning because they told them it was not jihad. They told them it was not religious jihad. They told them it was economic marginalization that brought this about and that it should be resolved by economic intervention, not military intervention. So there's blame on both sides of the equation.
But you're the wearer of the shoe knows where it pinches, isn't it?
Yes.
Nigeria knows where the problem originates from.
Yes.
Nigeria has been with this problem for enough time now.
Yes.
Doesn't it have the responsibility to actually tackle this issue before it can seek for help from the United States or any other external force?
Well, you see, the nature of jihadist terrorism is one that involves people from all nations to join hands. We saw what happened in Paris. The world came together to stand with them. The same way the world came together to stand with the United States on 9/11. But when this happened in Nigeria, we are not seeing the same kind of reaction. Look at Baga. 2,000 people died the same week that 17 people died in Paris.
This is what other people are saying. There hasn't been evidence of the leadership in Nigeria and even the leadership on the continent of Africa standing together to confront this threat. Why do African nations have to just sit and wait and hope for a Western nation to come in and help?
That's a good point. And we have to give credit to Chad and Niger, who are now saying that they want to help a little more, even though they had pulled back before. So you're right. We need to see leadership from Africans saying that Black Lives Matter too.
In fact, President Jonathan, as you saw in that package, is saying, we're going to build this multinational force, including all the other nations around in the neighborhood of Nigeria. Yeah. Why hasn't it happened?
Well, there has been a multinational force in place, but Boko Haram came and wiped them out, and that's why they retreated. Hopefully we can have more of that happen.
Well, we definitely are going to be talking about Nigeria, the election, the Boko Haram for many months to come. Well, thanks a lot, Emmanuel, for joining us today.
Always a pleasure, Vincent.
Well, Emmanuel Ogebe is an international human rights lawyer and expert in U.S.-Nigerian relations. Turning to the Middle East, U.S. President Barack Obama says U.S. counterterrorism operations in Yemen continue despite last week's resignation of President Abdurabu Mansour Hadi amid pressure from Shia Houthi militiamen who overran the presidential palace last week. Meanwhile, a U.S. drone strike in eastern Yemen has killed 3 suspected al-Qaeda militants on Monday as Yemenis protested on the streets of Sana'a. Thousands of Yemenis took to the streets in demonstrations against the Houthi group that dominates the country, just days after the President Abdurabu Mansour Hadi's resignation left the country in political limbo. Talks aimed at ending Yemen's political crisis faltered on Sunday when 3 of the country's main political parties quit negotiations with the Iranian-backed Shia Houthi group, raising the prospect of growing chaos. The Houthi fighters, a guerrilla force drawn from a Shia minority that ruled a 1,000-year kingdom in Yemen's highlands until 1962, first seized the capital Sana'a in September. Initially, there was little public action in a country that has gone through numerous cycles of instability. But this week saw the largest anti-Houthi demonstration since the movement took over the capital. One protest on Monday said people wanted to see a legitimate government in control.
I took to the streets in order to defend Yemen. We want legitimacy and a real national state for all Yemenis without any distinction.
Many Sana'a residents have complained as fighters have set up checkpoints, taken over government ministries, and spray-painted their green and red Iranian-inspired "Death to America, Death to Israel" slogans on mosques and on the wall around the old city. In a sign the Houthis might be losing patience, witnesses said they broke up a small protest outside Sana'a University on Sunday, firing shots in the air and arresting 8 protesters. Provinces across the rest of the country have said they will no longer take military command from Sana'a after the Iranian-allied Houthis besieged the home and palace of President Abdirabbu Mansour Hadi last week, prompting him to resign. The political vacuum showed no sign of easing on Sunday as Parliament indefinitely postponed its session to approve or reject Hadi's resignation as backroom political dealings carried on to negotiate a way out of the crisis. Now, for the situation in Yemen, we are joined on the phone from Sana'a by journalist Zaid Al-Alaya. Zaid, welcome to Africa 54, and just give us a sense of how it feels like today in Sana'a after day-long demonstrations.
Thank you very much, First Vincent. Now the situation is yesterday there were a number of arrests among demonstrators, but they were released soon after a large number of human rights activists gathered in one of the police stations where the demonstrators were held. But today, the number of demonstrators that were arrested, beaten up, has increased more than what happened yesterday. Now the situation is, I get from a number of sources, including colleagues and friends among journalists, that there is sort of a target among journalists who are demonstrating, also are trying to cover the demonstrations. A number of journalists were attacked, their cameras were broken, their machines and things were taken from them, and there is more than 25 people that have been arrested. Some other demonstrators were taken to unknown places, and by the high spread of popular committees of the Houthis or Ansarullah.
Now tell us,
and this thing will continue more.
Yeah, but Zaid, who really is in charge in Sana'a today?
Basically, it's the Houthis that are the strongest power in Sana'a. They control everything. They control the military. They control the security. Their people are spread in almost every single ministry. Their checkpoints are spread everywhere. They are putting, like, the president's house is under siege. Prime minister is under siege. A number of ministers' houses were also under siege.
Now, what do the people in Yemen think should be the best way forward right now?
As people are trying to get what as their dreams, they want civil state. They want the armed aspects, the armed, not just Houthis. They want all the armed people to be outside. And this time they learned their lesson. They don't want one single party to dominate their demonstrations. They have learned from their lesson in 2011 when the Islamists have taken power and control everything in the Chin Square and in the places where the sit-in were held in 2011. Now different factions from all political factions in Yemen are demonstrating against the Houthis. They're not completely against the Houthis. They're completely against the armed militia. They're protesting against the control of one single party over Yemen. They're calling for partnership in everything, and they're saying that all these political factions should come to an agreement and find a consensuous solution to Yemen and just share power.
Thank you, Zaid. Thanks a lot for the update.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that journalist Zaid Al-Alaya updating us on the latest over the phone from Sana'a in Yemen. Now, the death of Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah and the collapse of Yemen's government have cast further uncertainty on U.S. efforts to fight militants in the Middle East and also contain Iran's influence in the region. VOA's Luis Ramirez has more.
A complicated landscape on the Arabian Peninsula becomes even more complex as Saudi Arabia laid to rest its king and named his brother Salman as successor. At the White House Friday, officials expressed hope the Saudis would continue to work with the U.S. to prevent extremists from gaining a foothold in Yemen and using the country to launch terrorist attacks around the world.
Given their shared border, Saudi Arabia is particularly concerned about the activities of extremists in Yemen.
The landscape has been plunged into further uncertainty following the collapse of Yemen's U.S.-backed government. Yemen has been an important part of the U.S. fight against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which claimed responsibility for the Paris attacks this month. The previous leadership allowed the U.S. to carry out drone strikes at AQAP targets in the country. Now, the future of those and other counterterrorism operations is unclear. On Yemen, and in the fight against Islamic State militants, Saudi Arabia has been a strong U.S. partner. As hundreds of Saudis lined up to pledge loyalty to the newly crowned King Salman, indications were that the transition was smooth. Security analyst Anthony Cordesman sees no significant changes in the overall relationship.
The death of King Abdullah, frankly, will have very little impact. The new king, Prince Salman, is somebody who has a great deal of experience in working with the United States. He fully understands the alliance.
That alliance has recently been troubled, as evidenced during President Obama's trip to Saudi Arabia in March, when he heard what U.S. officials described as frank talk from King Abdullah. The Saudis see Mr. Obama's engagement of Iran, including the ongoing nuclear diplomacy, as a dangerous gamble that could inadvertently strengthen Tehran. After assuming the throne Friday, Abdullah's successor appeared on Saudi television and said he would continue the policies of his brother. Welcome words for U.S. officials at an uncertain time. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, at the White House.
Well, now to Egypt, where at least 15 people were killed as protesters marked the anniversary of a deadly 2011 uprising that ousted longtime leader Hosni Mubarak. Egyptian media reports dozens more were injured in clashes between security forces and demonstrators in Cairo and at least 2 other cities. Most of the deaths were in Cairo's Mataria district, an Islamist stronghold where police confronted supporters of the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. Violence began Saturday when police fatally shot activist Shamal al-Sabr in Cairo as she walked toward Tahrir Square to honor the protesters killed in January 2011. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Well, coming up, mobile technology spars water connections for a poor Nairobi neighborhood. Stay with us.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Well, in a visit promising symbolism and substance, U.S. President Barack Obama arrived in New Delhi Sunday with a pledge to take the U.S.-India relationship to a new level. Now, the President and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi vowed to deepen ties on a range of issues, including climate change and civilian nuclear cooperation. VOA's Arup Pandey reports from the Indian capital.
It was a whirlwind day that began with President Obama and the First Lady receiving a warm welcome from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who departed from protocol to greet the American leader on the New Delhi tarmac with a hug. A ceremonial welcome at the presidential palace, followed by a wreath-laying at a memorial for Mahatma Gandhi before President Obama sat down for talks with Prime Minister Modi. The American leader's visit is meant to build on what White House officials have called regained momentum in the U.S.-India relationship. And on Sunday, President Obama announced progress in implementing a civilian nuclear deal both nations reached a decade ago, working through obstacles of who is liable in the case of a nuclear accident and how nuclear material will be tracked in India.
Today we achieved a breakthrough understanding on 2 issues that were holding up our ability to advance our civil nuclear cooperation, and we're committed to moving towards full implementation. And this is an important step that shows how we can work together to elevate our relationship.
The two leaders also pledged to work together to fight climate change through the phasing out of hydrofluorocarbons and the commitment to pursue a strong global agreement during the December United Nations summit in Paris. Prime Minister Modi said India is not under pressure from a deal the United States and China reached late last year to cut carbon emissions.
But there is pressure. When we think about the future generations and what kind of world we're going to give them, then there is pressure. Climate change itself is a huge pressure.
Climate change itself.
The press briefing ended with both leaders acknowledging the forging of a personal friendship. That rapport and chemistry was evident on Sunday as Prime Minister Modi reciprocated the personal tour he received of the Martin Luther King Memorial just 4 months earlier in Washington. Before facing the cameras, the leaders of the world's two largest democracies took a stroll alone through the garden and had conversation over tea. Arup Pandey, VOA News, New Delhi.
Well, Kenya's slum residents lack basic services like running water and electricity, but that is changing as the World Bank and the Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company roll out a program to allow residents to pay their water bills by mobile phone. The technology is the first of its kind in East Africa. Mohammed Yusuf reports from Nairobi.
Kayole slum. More than 100,000 people live here. For decades, this now deserted public borehole had been the only source of water. But that is changing. The World Bank and Nairobi Water Company 5 years ago began a program to provide clean and cheap water to residents. Thousands of people now have water piped to their homes, and more are applying for water connections. Veronica Njeri says the connection of water to her house provides many benefits.
Siku hizi maji tunatumia na kukunywa, kufua nguo, kupaguza kama nyumba na vyombo. Na ni maji safi. Hii hata ukikunywa unasikia kiu still iko. Dunia chumvi.
Those who have piped water like Njeri say it has saved them time and contributed to the general cleanliness and health of their families. The connected residents use their mobile phones to acquire and pay their bills. Mary Mwangi says it is now easy for her to pay her bills without delay.
Niliishisha kazi kwa sababu mbeleni nilikuwa naenda huko Kayore na Pagaraini, sometimes napata kumefungwa, but by then nikijua tu leading zangu ninalipa kwa simu.
This innovative technology has boosted the confidence of the water authorities to expand the distribution system. The company has incurred losses in the slum areas where there are illegal water connections and consumers are not paying their bills. Vicky Kimayo is in charge of the project in Kayole. She says the water company is finding it easy to operate in areas like this.
I mean, there were illegal connections, people were getting water for free. But right now, of course, they get metered and they pay for the water. So, of course, for the utility, that's a plus. And for us who work in such an informal settlement, we are happy about it.
With more people applying for water connections and high demand for clean water, the company is now facing a challenge to provide all the water that is needed. For now, they are rationing water by dividing the area into zones and giving customers in each zone just a few hours to fill their containers. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Nairobi.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the hottest fashion looks from the Screen Actors Guild Awards red carpet. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Nigeria, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says that the United States will continue to support the Nigerian military in the fight against Boko Haram. In Zambia, Edgar Lungu is sworn in as the country's 6th president after narrowly winning a vote rejected by the opposition. In Switzerland, the World Health Organization's chief calls for reforms in light of shortcomings in responding to the Ebola epidemic. Finally, in Malawi, health concerns arise for survivors of devastating floods that killed almost 200 and left 200,000 homeless. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. A big night for actors of African descent at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. Well, breaking from the nice red carpet trend of solid colors, the lovely Lupita Nyong'o lit up the night as usual in a striped, sharp gown and even did a little twirl. Nigerian-American Uzo Aduba, who won for her role of Crazy Eyes in Orange is the New Black, went with a brilliant yellow Angel Sanchez gown. Well, next up, a relative newcomer to the pageant world is crowned Miss Universe. Miss Colombia Paulina Vega has been crowned Miss Universe, beating out first runner-up Miss USA Nia Sanchez and contestants from more than 80 other countries at Sunday's pageant in Miami. Vega, a 22-year-old student of business administration, said she will wear the crown with pride and excitement as she heard the news that fans in Colombia had taken to the streets to celebrate. And finally, get out your handkerchiefs now. Oscar winner Julia Roberts will produce a feature film about a bad kid, Miles Scott, whose touching story captivated the world in 2013. Bad Kid became an instant and surprise sensation when the nonprofit Make-A-Wish Foundation, in partnership with San Francisco, transformed the city to Gotham City for the day, allowing Miles to live out his dream of being superhero Batman for a day. No release date for Robert's Bad Kid feature has been set, and that is what is trending today. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
On Assignment really is designed to be your backstage pass to VOA reporting all around the world.
But what VOA On Assignment does is to put you in the driver's seat with that reporter, so you would see things as a reporter sees it.
We allow our reporters to tell us the details that they weren't able to include in their stories.
VOA Economics Editor Jim Randall, thanks so much. VOA On Assignment puts a human face to the stories of our correspondents.
That's really what it's all about.
We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA.